There are several component patterning options within the assembly, and these all allow you to quickly create or recreate components within the assembly without having to go back in and using the insert components, as well as having to create new mates to position those components. So the first pattern we'll look at is the linear component pattern. And these patterns work in the same manner as the feature level patterns within the part environment. And so most of the options are exactly the same. First, you'll choose a direction. Then we'll go ahead and choose a component. You can set some sort of spacing and choose our number of instances, as well as flipping the direction. We can also use the direction to option. And we have the same settings there. And we can also choose that pattern seed option, which will pattern off of the seed peg that we chose. We can skip several instances if we want. And then we can complete the pattern. I also wanted to point out that there are several patterns already on the plate, and the linear pattern and circular pattern have no association with these feature patterns. We'll be using them for the feature-driven pattern within this assembly. Now you'll notice when I move one of these components that all of them rotate. All of these pattern components will be linked back directly to the positioning of that seed component. You'll notice under the mates we have our local pattern stored with all of those added in components, as well as the instance count and the spacing. And we can do several things with this. We can hide this all out from the local pattern. We can delete out the feature. And we can also dissolve the pattern. And that'll bring this all above that mates folder. You'll want to be careful with this, as once you dissolve the pattern, all your mates are removed out. So these are now free floating. Now we're going to go ahead and create a circular component pattern. And I set up an axis for the parameters. So go ahead and show any axes. And I'll go ahead and choose out this component. And then I can choose out several different things for the parameters. Essentially any edge or face I select will become the revolution parameter for the circular pattern. If I choose this axis, it'll go ahead and rotate these components about a circle that I had created earlier. Once again, we have those instances to skip if we want to choose that option as well. And then I can just right click to exit the feature. Next, we'll look at the mirror components. And for this, we'll choose out a plane and then choose out several components to mirror. And you'll notice with the mirror components, we have a next button. We have several options here. And we can reorient the components in several ways. You can see at the bottom we have 4 different options. You'll notice that this part is upside down. And we can change this one to upside down as well if we change these. We can also create an opposite hand version of the part if we need a left or right-handed version instead. And I could isolate out a single component as well and try to reorient this properly. So if I go into that second option, it looks correct. So with the mirror components, you have several options on how to orient these components, and you may have to go through and modify that. But that's how you use the mirror component in the component patterns. Lastly, we'll look at the feature-driven component pattern. And I'll go ahead and choose this feature. And all I have to do is select the linear pattern, and it's going to automatically add those components in. I can also skip instances, and at the bottom I have an option to propagate the component level visual properties. So in this case, if I had a component level appearance, this would apply to that component as well. And if we uncheck that, should go back to the other color. In this case, it automatically added on top, so we'd have to remove out that appearance. Lastly, we'll create the feature-driven component pattern for this splined feature. And we'll just select out this face. For the feature-driven component pattern, as well as the linear and circular patterns, we can select out a seed position. And that'll treat this point as the seed. And it'll shift the spline down to the component that we've selected. We can also choose multiple components. You'll notice that these also follow along that spline, but they offset the spline to the center of each of these components. But that's how you use the component level patterns. They're useful for quickly repeating components within an assembly.